Hello and welcome to Take Time. I am your host, Patrick Marlett, and today we are continuing our conversation on the Tockr Air Defender. This is part 2, our in-depth review of this gorgeous 70s-inspired aviator's watch. And if you haven't watched our part 1 video, I'll encourage you to do that now. In that, you'll see an unboxing and first impression on this very item. Just a brief disclaimer before we begin this video, this watch was gifted to the channel, so thank you, Austin and the team over at Tockr, for sending this piece my way, and a special thanks goes out to Terry of Toxic Natos for getting me in touch with their camp to make this review possible. And on that note, you can take my following opinions however you choose. Now, with all part 2 reviews, I like to start off by commenting on some of the frequently asked questions in our part 1 video. Any questions, comments, or concerns, that is, and the big one in regards to the Tockr Air Defender was the price. It is a little expensive to buy into the Tockr family of watches. I get that. I know exactly what you're talking about. You know, I don't have thousands of dollars to throw around either, so it's nice being able to have this just gifted to the channel. But do I think the price is worth it? I think the nearest competitor to this watch would be something like the Mark I from Valjoux. I wouldn't say it's a lesser known brand. It's been around for ages, I think since the 60s and or late 60s, early 70s, but they went defunct, they came back, and they're producing their Mark I series of chronograph, which is a Valjoux 7750 chronograph that also comes on bracelet. A little bit more traditional styling with the case, but it is very similar to this, and those can be commonly found around $2,000. Now, this particular configuration on this leather strap, which we'll get to in just a second, retails for $1,600. I think from a price standpoint, they're comparably the same. So far as the Valjoux I've seen, the quality is pretty much on spot. They're on par with each other there. So do I think it's worth it? It's really up to you, ultimately, whether this price is fine with you or not. But what I can say is that this is effectively more affordable than its competitor, and it uses the same movement. Whether it's the same grade of 7750, I can't state. I don't know what Valjoux uses, but I'm willing to bet they use the same type of 7750 in theirs. And, you know, of course, the accessory bundles you get with this are a little different than that and change the price. I forget how much these run on a bracelet. I think they're $1,800 flat, as a matter of fact, and it's just a little bit more for that hick strap, and we'll get to the pricing in just a second. But just to answer that, question, or rather just that frequent comment, is this worth the price? I mean, I think so if you were comparing it with its competitors. Of course, you can buy vintage Valjoux 7750 watches, pieces that this was apparently inspired after, for less or right around the same, depending on what brand it is. That's sort of the going rate for this, type of watch, though, an automatic chronograph like this, despite how old this movement is. And it's been around for a while, these 7750s. At any rate, I think with that out of the way, we can get into our review. And as I mentioned in our first video, there are a ton of buying options for this watch. Not only can you get the case in stainless steel, you can get it coated in a PVD black, which raises the value of the watch just a little bit. Obviously, this configuration is the most affordable. This is just the calfskin leather strap. This is $1,600, and it goes up to $1,850 for the Hicks leather strap option. And here are the different accessory options you can get with your Air Defender, and this is the Hicks strap I was referring to just a moment ago. This Barden strap, I guessed it in our first video. This is a silicone-based strap option that will come with the watch regardless of which option you buy, and this is the bracelet option, and you'll notice I've changed out the buckle, or rather the clasp. I'll tell you why in just a moment. So with all of the accessory options in hand, I'm going to go over this in-depth review a little differently than I do most of my two-part videos, by starting with the accessories first, all of them, before moving on to the watch head. Of course, going over the bad, then the good, before I give my final verdict on the review item. But before we get to the nitty-gritty, let's go over some of the most important parts of this watch, and that is the scale and, of course, what it's rocking internally. And we have a Valjoux 7750, as I hinted at just a moment ago, on the inside with a custom rotor. This piece has roughly 42 hours of power reserve. The case itself features a screw-down crown that's also stainless steel, and that allows this watch to get up to 10 atmos of water resistance, so 100 meters of water resistance. If you don't know what the Valjoux 7750 offers you, there is a 30-minute counter at the top there when the chronograph is actuated, and you can see that chrono hand moving now. There's a 12-hour counter at the bottom, and of course a 60-second counter at the 9 o'clock position. There's also a date function off to the right-hand side here next to the Tockr logo, automatic and chronograph text. The case of the Tockr Air Defender is of course made out of 316L stainless steel, and if you get the bracelet, it is also made of that same material and finished in PVD black should you buy that option. The back side of the case features a sapphire crystal as well as the top side here. And so far as measurements are concerned, and these are my own, I got 45 millimeters in diameter, 48 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, and I mean the furthest point out, so right there to right there. The case itself is roughly 15 millimeters thick, and I mean from the back of that sapphire crystal to the top of that other sapphire crystal. And it features 22 millimeter lug widths. I want you all to know right off the bat, I wore this watch predominantly on this stock standard leather strap option. It was easily my favorite amongst the options. So if you were looking to budgetize buying an Air Defender, don't worry, this is a fantastic strap. It's a good route to go. Unless you're a bracelet nut and you have to get the bracelet, this was easily my favorite option, and for a lot of reasons, which I'll get into lastly. But in no particular order, why don't we look at some of those accessories? Off to the side, we have our Hicks leather strap, and I have to say this is easily my second favorite option of the bat. And I'm going to not include the Barden strap here as one of those options, as you'll get it with any of the options you select, although it is an excellent strap. Again, I did a review on this strap before, and I'll touch on it here, but you should check that out. It's the Barden Elite silicone strap. So the Hicks leather strap. My only gripe with this item, there's actually two, is that the keeper here, it initially came with two. That didn't break off or fall off. I took it off because there's not that much room for that secondary keeper to even float on this strap, not at least comfortably, because of the way this leather strap is cut and accomplished. It's very beautiful, this like extra bit of detailing with the stitch work here, but it adds thickness to the strap, and that did mess up how the keeper sat on my wrist when wearing the tail end of my strap through the end here. And you know, I actually wore it to a point where it wasn't absolutely necessary that I even had a secondary keeper. What I wish they went with for this strap was a thicker, wider keeper instead. I wish I had an option for you, but Watch Gecko does a really good job of having just big, fat, singular keepers. I think that would have been a better option for a leather strap with this little relief between the buckle end and this detailing here. If you look deep in there, you'll see that it's white to match the panda dial of my watch here. I'm going to show you that now. And it's really charming, as a matter of fact. I quite like that, but as you can imagine, with such a big watch and such a wide strap, one that's somewhat modeled to match perhaps a bun strap for your Flieger, it doesn't breathe that well. I almost wish that there was an option to just purchase this with perforations that went all the way through the leather here so that it was a little bit more breathable. And you know, you can move that text down here if it was absolutely necessary, but I would have preferred actual perforations. I don't know if that would have ruined the structural integrity, but I did find my wrist tended to sweat while I was wearing this. And it is, you know, getting a little bit hotter here in New York right now. But the last few days, it was pretty darn cold. And finding my wrist sweat in the cold was just odd. I think this just covers up too much surface area and doesn't breathe enough, despite how lifted this is off the wrist. And of course, I'll show you what this looks like in just a moment on the watch, as it is a quick release spring bar. I do love that. But while we're down here, why don't we talk about what I liked? These are really nice, very supple. You know how I love supple straps. They conform to your wrist really well. Not only that, they smell really good. If you like fine leather goods, this is one of them. This is an awesome option for the watch. It's interesting, though, that the pricing of this is more expensive than the stainless steel bracelet. I don't know how that deal works out, but this was my second favorite option of the lot. So, you know, there's that. I do like how this wears on the wrist, and I do like the look it provides for the watch. It really completes it in more way than, you know, this calf strap does. It sort of just floats there in space, but it's made to look great with the cutout there, which we'll get into when I talk about the case. But how these, you know, conform to the case just looks a lot better to me. It's definitely not a look for everyone. If you don't like how bun straps look, you're not going to like how this looks. But I think this is a solid leather strap option if you're looking to get an Air Defender. A larger singular keeper would have been preferable, at least to me. If you prefer secondary keepers, well, that's how it's shipped. However, I will state that if your wrist is smaller than mine, you will find it difficult to fit that keeper with the strap over this extra bit of detailing, as I mentioned. And of course, breathability. We have a very thick, heavy watch on our wrist. I think it would have been better to go with like something more akin to a rally strap with actual holes punched through. They're nice and breathable. We can put them on our pilot's watches or chronographs as well. I think they look good. Of course, you can switch this out for whatever you want, but it would have been cool to have a stock option that was a leather bund-esque strap that was also breathable. However, I do like the color-matched perforated holes. I do think that's a nice touch. It would be nice if you were able to select. Obviously, I didn't put in an order for this. Let me know if you do, if you're able to select which Hicks strap you want. Instead of getting one that's color matched, maybe you want one that's off color. I don't know. That would be very cool though. Oh boy, what can I say that hasn't been said about this strap? I absolutely adore the Elite silicone strap. This is one of my favorite rubber options. If you're going to do anything aquatic, this is the strap to go for. The textured top, again, as I remarked in my review, it'd be nice to get a smooth surface as well if you don't like the waffle patterning here. However, as a whole, this strap is excellent. It's a great addition to the package. However, I will state that when you purchase one of these from Barden, and you can see here that this is indeed a Barden strap. When you purchase these from Barden, they'll give you two tongue lengths, or rather, these bottom strap lengths, so that if you have a smaller wrist, you can fit this to your smaller wrist. If you have a larger wrist, you can fit it to a larger wrist. And the watch is pretty big and it sits far from the wrist, so there was no way I was ever going to turn to the smaller end of the strap. But if you have a wrist that's smaller than mine, which is 7¼ in diameter, and you wanted to wear this watch, it would have been nice to have that option as a backup for you, but that isn't provided. Of course, you can just go ahead and buy a Barden silicone strap. Perhaps they have a backlog of these tail end straps in case you do have a smaller wrist. You can just ask for that, but that's something to note. I didn't receive that with my packaging. That silicone strap is amazing. I have a black and red one that I received a while back for that review. I've been wearing that a lot on this watch. It's just so fun to mix and match those straps with whatever you're wearing, and they're just so darned comfortable. If you don't know what an Elite silicone strap feels like on the wrist, it's one of Barden's best selections, so it's cool that that's an added accessory here. And let's get to the last option here. This is our bracelet for the Tockr Air Defender, and I don't have it on the watch head now. If you want to see what this looks like on the watch head, I'll defer you to my part 1 video, because I'm not going to try to place this on the watch head. And that's one of my first bad notes in regards to the bracelet. It looks as though it should have come with curved spring bars, but it didn't. And the spring bars that were in there, had trouble fitting themselves into the watch head. This is a very difficult squeeze, and if you're not good with a spring bar tool, it might be a little frustrating. And even I, with all my years of experience, was having a little bit of difficulty fitting these end links onto the watch head. And I wore this for probably say 50% of the time. I had it on the bracelet before I switched, and then I was in and out of the 3 other options that I have. Because I want to get a good feel for this bracelet, and it's a well-made quality bracelet, but I did find it difficult to take on and off the watch head. This is one of those instances where I kind of wish this was outfitted with perhaps a quick release curved spring bar, and I could just pop it off and then put it on a different strap. Almost like how Baltic does their quick release metal bracelets. There's a lot of groups that are transitioning to doing quick release metal bracelets, and I kind of like that. If you're selling me on a whole quick release system, it's nice if the bracelet was matched. Because, we don't actually get a tool for this either. So, if you're looking to take this off of the watch head, you're going to need to buy a tool in addition to, obviously, whatever accessories you might have purchased from Tockr at that same time. So it would have been good if a tool were provided or this were made quick release as well. Now, aside from the difficulty of putting these end links onto your watch head, I have to state that the look of the two in tandem with one another is phenomenal. It really completes the look of this watch head. And I'll put some images up now so you can see what this looks like in pair with the watch head. It's a fantastic look. It does extend the lines of the case, but because the look is integrated. It doesn't feel like the watch is longer on the wrist. It more feels like it's a singular bracelet. I don't know if that makes sense, like a bangle. Like it was made to wrap around the wrist in such a way. That's, of course, indebted to how these end links were constructed and the look they accomplished with them. And so far as the rest of the bracelet is concerned, the links themselves are phenomenal. They're weighted very well. There's a lot of steel here. You definitely feel like you're getting your money's worth out of this product. And of course, there's screw-in links. There aren't any half links provided. There's just the one type of H-link here, but it's done well enough to secure this onto my wrist comfortably, even with the original clasp, which I'll get to in just a moment. It's really my last minor bad note in regards to the bracelet. You can see I switched out here for a slightly heavier duty clasp that I had laying around. I usually buy a handful of these because I do like the extra levels of micro adjustment, particularly when it comes to a bracelet that doesn't have any refinements in that regard, any half links and or a clasp itself that features more micro adjustment levels. You'll see that these are notched very close to one another. They're not spread out very well, and there's all this real estate for additional micro adjustments, but they went without. And although I do like how this is finished to match that finishing of the bracelet, I just prefer using my own clasp in this instance. This is certainly good enough for the end consumer. I do like the detailing of it, but I just prefer a watch clasp that allows me to fit the watch head more comfortably to my wrist. So the bracelet in my book is A-OK at the asking price of $1,800, which is $200 more than your calf leather option here. I think that's a great addition to the watch if you wanted to purchase this on a bracelet instead of a leather strap. And on that note, this leather strap. So this was sent to me a little bit later. You'll notice that this isn't featured in our unboxing, but they went ahead and sent this my way to check out. And you'll notice that much like I was arguing for the bracelet's sake, these feature curved spring bars. These are the easiest to install on the watch head. This case was certainly made for curved spring bars, in my opinion, and these just go on and off the watch head so easily. The strap itself is extremely comfortable, and it smells fantastic. It looks fantastic. There's nothing to complain about here. Of course, this also had a secondary keeper there, but I removed that as well. And I'll make the same argument here, similar to the Hicks strap, because the watch head is so big and it wears to some of those final holes on the tail end of my strap. We probably could have just gone with a larger keeper here to keep this cinched down to the wrist. Obviously a floating larger keeper, not one that's fixed like this. But, this more traditional style works out just fine for this watch. It's not necessary in this instance, but again, it would have been preferred. I like this option the best because the dimensions of this case, although they seem large on paper, they don't wear large. It's similar to wearing a Seiko Tuna. If you've ever worn a Seiko Tuna, this feels quite the same on the wrist. It's surprisingly small despite its overall scale, and this leather strap option here makes it wear as such. It just wears, more comfortably on the wrist with a leather strap instead of, say, the bracelet option and or the Hicks option. Those make it feel like a big, bold watch, where this makes it feel more like a dress casual piece. Again, despite its scale, that's probably hard to fathom, but it wears really well in day-to-day use on this leather strap. And again, this is what it's been living on for me since I received it. And again, here is what it looks like on that calf leather strap. Of course, I'll get you a wrist shot just a little bit later, and here's what it looks like on the Hicks leather strap. And I know what you're thinking. I'm wearing the strap backwards. Sometimes I'll wear the leather straps this way so that the tail end faces me instead. I kind of like that better. But this option, it's reversible. You don't have to wear it like this if you don't want to, but you get the impression I'm stating with how this looks like a bun strap, where a bun strap is one where there's a single pass strap that's overlaid with a piece of leather and or canvas material to separate the watch head from your wrist, despite the single pass strap going through. It just wears bigger on the wrist due to that extra piece of leather and or canvas, where this has that same appearance but doesn't add any thickness to the watch head. And I actually really like that. This is a really awesome option in my opinion. Again, it's definitely my second favorite of the options, and you know I'm a bracelet guy, but I definitely wore this on leather more than anything else. And just so you can see what this looks like on that Barden strap, here it is now. It just pairs so well with it. Gosh, and I'm going to break into a little bit of a discussion about the case here. Initially, I thought this would look better if the lugs were completely shrouded, but having worn through all of the options, I have to state that having that cut out on the case, which is akin to the rest of Tockr's family of watches, which we'll discuss in just a moment, really makes this look that much better in my opinion. This sort of semi-shrouded appearance, because the holes themselves are inside the case there. You can see it's semi-shrouded. It's not a complete shroud, but I do like those cutouts. The look they provide with these accessory options is really phenomenal. And of course, this on a Barden Elite silicone strap, I love this look. I gotta buy some more Barden straps. I kind of want one, like a two-tone white and black. I forget if that's an option. Pretty sure it is. But I'd love to get a white and black silicone strap with this. And that is it for the accessory portion of this video. And when I provide a wrist shot near the end of this video, I'm only going to wear it on the one option for the sake of time, but it will be this calf leather option. Again, this is my favorite of the lot. If you're looking to get in on this watch, this is the way I would go. It's just the nicest wearing for this watch head, in my opinion. And speaking of the watch head, I want to go ahead and start with a few of my bad notes. There aren't too many to list off. However, if you take a look at the date window, I've noticed that the alignment of the day isn't always squarely center. It's hard for me to tell looking through this camera, but you might be able to see that it is slightly right aligned, and it should fit more squarely in frame when you're taking this watch in. I don't know if you can see that, but you see how the N in Sunday is very close to that bar that's separating the day date. It does sit just a little right of center on my model. If you own a Tockr Air Defender, I'd love to know if that's the same for you. And maybe I'm going crazy here, but if you can tell what I'm talking about, let me know. So that's just one minor complaint, something I noticed about the balance of this style. Everything else is really tidy. So things like that, to me, stand out. Heck, I'm even having to check it off camera to make sure I'm not crazy. But when Tuesday rolls around, you'll notice that it is slightly right of center. And again, that could just be my model. This might be a one-off defect. I don't know. But let me know if you own an Air Defender and you've noticed this as well. The other thing to note with this particular watch, and this could be the same for any Valjoux 7750, I've never actually owned a Valjoux 7750 timepiece, so this might be a unique experience to this model, or this might be every one of them. But I will state that the rotor that's on the inside, it's sort of like a Miyota 9015, and that it is pretty audible. And you might not like the sound of that wobbling, rotor. I believe it's a unidirectional wind, this particular movement, but when it is winding, you can hear it wind up. And it's not too loud when you're city slicking like I am, but in the private of your home, you'll notice it rattling away. And I say rattle, it's not like a metallic clang, it's just the whirring of this wheel rotating around to power up your watch. And it is, markedly loud. You can tell that it's moving when it's moving. Earlier, I mentioned how the bracelet was difficult to fit onto the watch head, and maybe I put too much of the blame on the bracelet itself because the way the lugs are manufactured, of course, they were trying to get this in as compact a package as possible. 48 millimeters from lug end to lug end is actually a really nice scale for most wrist. However, there isn't that much space between where the spring bars are supposed to rest and the watch head. So a part of the blame could be indebted to this aspect here. It would have been nicer if the spring bars rested just a little bit further out, and or the case could have been shaved straight here across. I don't know how that could have been accomplished. If the movement retention ring, all of the mechanics on the inside were tighter, if there was space for this, it would be great if this hollow here, this semi-shrouded hollow here, had a little bit more room for your accessories to breathe. That way it would be just a little bit easier to fit on said end link and or whatever strap you're looking to put on this watch head. And lastly, my final complaint about this watch is the lume. You know, I'm not a lume junkie. I don't necessarily care for lume, but it is kind of difficult to read in the dark. You know, if you are a pilot, I hope you have lighting in your cabin because you'll probably need it. The lume on this watch is featured not only on the 60 seconds hand, but the handset itself, as well as the rest of the dial. And in most lighting conditions, dim conditions, it is a tad difficult to read, and it was easier for me to read the time on this so far as legibility was concerned because of the contrast of the white and black dial. It's very easy to distinguish that handset and the shine of those markers, but in most instances I was relying on the brightness of those applied markers, the metal of those applied markers, as opposed to the lume. I think we can use a slight upgrade here. Perhaps it's just my model, but you'll see in a lume shot here that it's kind of a dim display of lume. Not the best in my opinion. So the lume is just a little weak on my model. The day rests just a little right of center. And of course, there isn't enough spacing, in my opinion, for the bracelet to fit on this option. With those minor complaints out of the way, what is there to like about the Tockr Air Defender? Well, pretty much everything else. I really do love this design, and I like how this design carries from their C47 series to their D-Day watch. It's a good-looking watch case, and it has a language to it that is uniquely Tockr's own, and I like that they found that language and are sticking with it throughout their designs. You know, they're not trying to copy anyone's style in that regard. This is a chronograph, in my opinion, that is uniquely inspired. And honestly, that nod to the 1970s, you know, I could only find so many pieces back then that really harkened to the design of this piece. Mito and Longines made a watch, as a matter of fact, with a Valjoux 7750 that looked somewhat similar to this. But honestly, stating that this piece is designed after military pilots' watches from the 1970s does this watch a disservice. Because personally, I think this looks a lot better than a handful of those designs. The way the case is accomplished here is really handsome. I love the bezel-less design of this chassis and the no-frills, military-inspired aesthetic. Well, that is aside from the Zaratsu finishing. I'm calling it Zaratsu finishing of the case sides and of course the lug tips here. And obviously the back is also high polish where that display window is, but the top end of the watch has this really beautiful radial brushing across its entire surface, and it just brings a nice unified look to the overall appearance of this watch head. It's really, really pleasing to take in, and the way it captures light, you can see that here, is just really stunning, particularly in daylight. But while we're looking at that dial, why don't we discuss it now? It's really gorgeous. I do like the minute track, the additional minute timer on the crown here at the 10 o'clock crown. Although some folks mentioned in our first video, it would be nice if that was a 12-hour indicator instead. It'd be great to get that option in the future. But I will state that having this as a 5-minute increment track is great if you're just trying to read the time. It makes it so much easier on the user. What's also cool is that the Panda dial variant, as opposed to any of the other dial options, features a handset that's been modified so that it easily contrasts the dial, the white of the dial, with those black tips. And you'll notice if you check out the website, of course, there's a link to that in the description. The other models don't feature this detailing. So there was a lot of thought that went into how this design should work. Obviously, its legibility. And I also like that they went with a black day and date wheel. It just balances the dial out really well, particularly with the black Tockr text and of course the covered automatic chronograph text over at the 3 o'clock position with the black subdials of the Panda here. It's just a really good look. One other noticeable difference about the Panda dial variant as opposed to the other options that Tockr offers, that being the Silverado dial, the Hulk dial, as well as the black and blue, is that the hour markers here are applied to the dial, where the other options have painted lume plots with 5-minute increments that correspond with the time on the dial, obviously. Those have definitely more of a military vibe where this has a dressier appeal to it. And I'll state, and this further enforces the idea of the inner rotating bezel being a 12-hour track instead, at least as an option for those more military styled dials with the minute tracks on the dial itself, or the minute indicators on the dial itself. But if you wanted a dressier, cleaner option, something with less text on the dial, the Panda dial variant is definitely the way to go. One of the reasons I liked it best. And without further ado, I'd love to provide you all with a wrist shot of the Tockr Air Defender on my 7¼ inch wrist. Now I'll state that this Valjoux 7750, I don't know where it's regulated, but it has been gaining time, not drastically so. I forget what these are regulated to, or rather their suggested plus or minus activity should be, but it's gained maybe like 5 seconds within a 24-hour period, which isn't too crazy. I'd rather my watch gain time than lose time. That way I can just stop the seconds hand and start it back up when it catches up with, well, when the world catches up with me. But here is the Tockr Air Defender on a 7¼ inch wrist for all of your admirers on the stock standard calf leather strap. Again, the best option in my opinion. And here's what it's going to look like when you go to admire it. And here it is on my 7¼ inch wrist. Again, it doesn't feel like such a big boy when you've got it dressed up on a leather strap. And maybe that's why I enjoy this look so much on leather. Again, it does have a slightly dressier appeal than a utilitarian one with those applied markers as opposed to the painted ones on the dial, but I do really love that about this model. And honestly, the watch head itself changes in appearance when you have it off of the bracelet. It's just a really dramatic look when you see the fat ends of those lugs cut off from the sides to allow for those end links to rest against the case and integrate themselves with the watch head. It feels like a different watch on the wrist entirely. Of course, again, if you wanted to see this watch on the bracelet with some genuinely good wrist rolling, you can watch our part 1 video for all of that. But this is what the Air Defender will look like if you have a 7¼ inch wrist, again, on that leather strap, and it looks smashing. The Tockr Air Defender is easily one of the nicest watches I've had sent in a long while, and I'm not just saying that. The case speaks for itself. The level of detailing here found on the Tockr Air Defender is definitely on par with its price range. I think the case head along with the bracelet is an excellent option, but for those of you looking to get this at a more affordable rate, I think the calf leather strap is an excellent way to go. This is a really phenomenal military-infused modern-day chronograph. And if you're looking for a Swiss-made automatic chronograph, this is a great way to go, particularly with that Valjoux 7750 at the heart. This is an automatic movement that's been in the game for a long time, and it's here to stay. And Tockr, with its Air Defender, did that movement justice. Now, if you found this video enlightening or in the least entertaining, feel free to hit that like button. Looks a whole heck of a lot like this guy. If you have friends, forums, or groups that are interested in picking up the Tockr Air Defender, well, feel free to share this video with them first so they can get another consumer's opinion on the piece. Also, if you are new to the channel, well, welcome. I do videos like this monthly. And if you enjoy watch content, feel free to slam that subscribe button. And while you're down there, you can hit the little bell icon just next to that to be alerted as to when my videos air. Again, my name is Patrick Marlett, and thank you for the time.